So joining me now are Tré Easton, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs at the Searchlight Institute and the former Deputy Chief of Staff to Senator John Fetterman, and Terrance Woodbury, who is the President and Partner at HIT Strategies. I want to get you all's reaction. Tré, let's turn back to the Senate race. Earlier, the Maine Democratic Party, they put out a statement, a video actually, and they put it out on Facebook with an update about the race and the process to find Graham Platner's replacement. I want to play that for you.
Graham Platner's team has repeatedly reached out to us in an attempt to put their thumb on the scale of what this process looks like. We have repeatedly reiterated to Graham Platner's team that they have no role in determining our next Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, nor in determining what this process looks like. We have also reiterated that Graham Platner must drop out of this race so that Democrats in Maine can focus on defeating Susan Collins this November.
It is important to note that Graham Platner's team pushed back and denied that it was trying to influence the process. Maybe we all need a shared definition of what influence the process is. Right. They want to make sure that the person replacing Graham Platner, they have an interest in that given the campaign that he built. Does that sound like demands to you or having a say in trying to who's to replace them? To me, that sounds like finger on the scale.
Can I just say, as a person who is deeply invested in defeating #1 Trump enabler Susan Collins, as a person who is deeply invested in Democrats receiving a Senate majority in November, the fact that Graham Platner thinks that he can dictate anything at this point is so laughable to me. You forfeited that right when you lied to your constituents, when you lied to your supporters, to your volunteers, to your staff, to a group full of Senate Democrats who were trying to vouch for you and say that they had your back when you told them nothing else was coming. So, no, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to go back and forth in these cute little press statements on Twitter. You get to put out a press release saying that I have ended my campaign and the Maine Democratic Party gets to move on and replace you. Now, all that said, I think, kudos to Devin at the Maine State Democratic Party, because it sounds like they are ready to go. It sounds like they want to move on from this morass. It sounds like they have a process that's in mind that's going to be transparent, that's going to be at least some sort of open invitation to everyone who's going to want to run, including your previous guest. But in order to get that started, Graham Platner has to end. And I think everyone who's around him, the smart people, some of whom I text and know and respect, they need to understand this is over. There is no dictating. There is no, putting a finger on the scale for what kind of nominee it looks like. It's going to be in charge and led by not the D.C. Democrats, not the New York consultant Democrats, but it's going to be led by Maine Democrats, and that's how this has to go.
Terrance, let's talk about the process piece of this, because the New York Times points out that, quote, looming over the question of how Maine Democrats would replace Graham Platner is the specter of the Democratic National Committee's anointment of Kamala Harris when President Joseph R. Biden Jr. ended his 2024 campaign. Top Democrats in both Maine and Washington are acutely aware of hindsight, that there could have been a competitive process 2 summers ago, and would prefer to avoid appearing to pick a Senate nominee on their own. Now, I have some thoughts about what the New York Times has to say about Kamala Harris. I think people know my thoughts. They're very well documented. But let's keep the focus on Maine here. What do you think the process should be? Because I hear them saying they got a process. What is the process?
Well, listen, Symone, I like you reject the premise of New York Times article that Kamala Harris was the vice president, assuming the role of the president is the job, right? Like she stepped into the shoes that were made for her. But in terms of this process, I do think that transparency is going to be the priority. I do think there should be some type of debate forum, some way of introducing these candidates to voters. I do think that it is important that that voters get to weigh in here, but also that that ultimately Maine Democrats elect a candidate that can continue to appeal to the progressive populist base that Platner had activated. And frankly, that I do believe that moderate Democrats will come along with the nominee, because moderate Democrats also want to beat Susan Collins. But what we've seen in primaries across the country is that as these progressive candidates are activating younger voters and new voters that often have not participated in primaries or in midterms, that those candidates, that those voters may not show up for a general Democrat or for a moderate Democrat. And so I do think that the candidate and the process must appeal and maintain the coalition that Graham Platner put together. And I think that is that's. Listen, I do not envy the Maine Democratic Party right now. But the other good thing, the other good thing is that a lot of the candidates that they are considering have been introducing themselves to the voters in several other elections, have been vetted. I think the most important part of this process is that they are nominating a candidate that has a record that they've had to defend against a well-funded opponent, that they have an existing oppo book. I know I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here, but folks still watching the news at 11 o'clock are, don't mind the weeds a little bit. And so we need a candidate that has that already has an oppo book. We don't have time to build that has already had to defend their record and their history, and that we don't have to worry about any midnight surprises in October.
Not getting into the weeds is how the people who recruited Graham Platner got here. So maybe the weeds are important.